everyone. Welcome back to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. My name is Lee Perry, and in today's episode, I interview Walker Smith III during his campaign for Orange County Commission District 3. He's a lawyer, he's an activist, he's working hand in hand with immigrants who are being impacted by the ICE raids that are taking place here in Florida. He's a member of the 5051 Coalition and the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition, and he talks about all of the intersectional issues that are impacting our residents here in the county. Here's my conversation with Walker. All right, everyone. So we have a really awesome guest here who's running for Orange County Commission District 3, Walker Smith IV.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm a civil rights attorney and injury attorney, and I'm running to be the next District 3 Orange County Commissioner.
Well, for troublemakers like me, it's always good to know as many lawyers as you can, because I know one day I'm going to have to probably make bail and I'm going to need some legal guidance.
It's better to have one and not need it than need it and not have one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. And I'm here with you having some tea on this very chilly day.
Clink. Florida's on some mess right now with this cold.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm
and
grateful.
My little blanket. And I want to know more about you and where you grew up and how you became politically active.
Sure. So I was born in Fairfax, Virginia. My mom and dad actually ended up separating around the time I turned 5. My mom was an exotic dancer, and she was...
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. And my dad had a little T-Pain moment. But they planned to have me, but they quickly realized that... Well, I guess he heard Cats in the Cradle too many times. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to continue to be an electrical engineer because he didn't really have enough time at home. And so he ultimately made the decision that he was going to come down to Florida where his mom and his dad lived. I think his dad had actually passed by that time. But my grandma was here, and it was sort of a safety net. And so he wanted to move down here. My mom was not ready for any of that. So they separated, and he raised me by himself until I was 18 years old, and I was raised in Vero Beach, Florida. Technically, I spent most of my time in Gifford, Florida, which I think the technical term for it is a front porch community. I didn't hear that term until I came to Orlando. We just called it the hood when I was there. But Vero is very segregated, or at least it was when I grew up there. They had the rich folks that lived over on the bridge on the beach side. They had the middle class section that occupied the bulk of the center. And then the poor folks lived in Gifford. And it was a predominantly black community at the time, but poor has become more diverse these days. Mm-hmm. And so now it's diversified a little bit, but it was very enlightening growing up, and it was sort of one of the bedrock foundations of who I am. Yeah.
Well, when you were growing up, what were some of the things that you saw that, got you to be a little bit more aware of how that divide was happening in the community?
Yeah. So there were a couple instances. There are two that I'll never forget. The first one, I was walking to school. I had my little backpack on. My dad and I weren't super poor. We were at the poverty line, but he had a strong work ethic, and he instilled that in me. And he was working extra hours. He made sure we always made ends meet. And so he didn't have a car at that point to drive me to school. I was still walking to school, but he made sure I had my backpack. I had all my supplies. And so I was walking to school one day with my little backpack on, and I got stopped by the police because if I was white and in that part of town, I must be up to no good. I think what they told me is if you look like you and you're in this part of town, you're probably selling drugs. Mind you, I'm 11. I don't know what 11-year-old is out here, slinging on the corner, but it definitely was not me. So they put me down on the ground and they searched my bag, and I didn't know that was not allowed. I didn't know what to say. I was just a kid. And so that was sort of the foundational moment that had happened to me. But I had one a little earlier than that for my friends. I started to notice that some of my friends didn't make it to school anymore. Some of my friends' parents would end up in jail, and I never understood why we had this sort of duality, why I was given the benefit of the doubt to be in certain spaces and places. And even when we had to interact with police, I mentioned my bad experience, but that's one out of the many times I had to interact with them. Most of the times it wasn't violent. It wasn't super confrontational, but it always seemed that there was more force than necessary used on a lot of my friends. And I asked one of my teachers this. I was like, why is it that people in Gifford have police that kill them? Why is it the police are more likely to shoot somebody? Why is it that their family gets taken to jail and we live in a totally different world? and she couldn't really answer me. And I always think it's interesting. Kids have such a unique perspective on the world. They're able to see things that that adults rather, just sort of take for granted as part of the system, as normal or natural. But kids see things that aren't right, and they voice their opinion about it. And they'll sometimes ask profound questions like that. And that was sort of my light bulb moment. That was like, oh, the world isn't really fair. I have a privilege. I can do something about it. I can use that privilege to help my friends and help their families. And that was the moment I realized I wanted to do something. I didn't really know what. At that time, I wanted to get into acting because I thought that's how I could change the world. But I ended up here.
Politics is acting.
Every day.
That's so funny. So you're woke.
Oh, well, I don't classify myself under any sort of label, but if you want to call it that, you can call it that. Look, if woke means that I believe everybody should be treated with, certain levels of dignity and respect and humanity, then sure. If, woke is protecting our environment and making sure that it's able to be passed on for the next generation and not poisoning it, sure. I guess that means I'm woke.
The liberal mob. Well, that's awesome. At what point did you say law was where you wanted to go? Like, how did you get onto that path?
Yeah, so that was a long journey. I didn't really know that until high school. I was getting out of high school, and the acting thing, my dad was really encouraging about it. He was like, oh yeah, go do it. He brought me to theater. He always wanted to, Pops was a great guy, and he always wanted to support whatever I was up to. And so he never came out right and was like, you do know that most people that try this fail, and I don't want you to be a starving artist, but the vibes were definitely there. And so he wanted to push me into something that I would actually be able to sort of make a difference. And I don't know what it was that made me want to get into law. I'll tell you, when George Bush was president, I started disagreeing with a lot of things. I started becoming much more of a, what's the word? Oh my God, I'm blanking on the word. Dissenter. I started becoming much more of a dissenter politically. And that's when I sort of got involved. I liked sociology. I liked psychology. I liked how people thought about the world around them. And I started to like politics, and we went into, various parts of the world for various alleged reasons, when it was mostly about oil and keeping other countries in, resource status, or just taking their resources outright, which is something we see today. And I think that's really what started it for me. But I honestly didn't get really politically active until Trump got elected the second time. I didn't think that was something that was possible. I mean, we all experienced the first term. So I figured that trauma that we shared would have, made some of us aware that maybe we shouldn't go through this again. And boy, was I mistaken.
I mean, the insurrection alone to me, I never imagined we could have reelected that. But here we are. From
the back, the blue side, that are all about respecting police, and it doesn't matter if people beat police officers, we're going to go ahead and pardon them. And a lot of them have already been rebooked on new crimes. But yeah, I mean, what president in history? I can't think of any that could get away with an attempted coup like that. And then run for re-election and win. We definitely should have prosecuted him when we had the chance. But that ship will come again. It may have sailed for now, but it doesn't mean it won't come back into port.
Right. Well, with Trump being, re-elected, you obviously must have made a decision to run for office. What prompted that outside of Trump's re-election?
Well, I represent, as a civil rights attorney, I represented, and as a workers' comp attorney primarily, I represented undocumented people. I represented a lot of Latinos, and I was already starting to get involved in immigrants' rights organizations. Y también yo hablo español, soy fluido. Entonces, I really didn't like the way that he was treating certain groups of people. It sort of struck at that trauma from when I was living in Gifford. And I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like when the government abuses power against a certain group of people. And I recognized it. And some of the immigrant rights groups that I'm with, we talk about our mutual liberation, how none of us are free until all of us are free.
Absolutely.
And so once he started sending ICE out into the streets, once they started showing up in our neighborhoods, once we started seeing on every, camera, on TikTok and Instagram, what they were really doing, brutalizing our communities, that's when I couldn't stand it anymore. And even before then, as soon as he got elected, I went to my first protest. But I didn't get involved in politics until the ICE stuff started happening, really. And as a constitutional scholar in law school, they taught us all these cases about how the federal government cannot commandeer local governments and make the local agents do federal jobs. Prince v. United States, that was a 1997 case by Scalia. And he came out and he said the 10th Amendment reserves the right to the states of powers that were not expressly given to the federal government. And our Constitution in Florida has home rule. So we are supposed to be in charge of how our own local government operations are run, including the sheriff, including corrections. And then this case comes out in 97 that specifically says by Scalia, a conservative, that the federal government can't commandeer police officers. They can't commandeer sheriffs. They can't come in and have the local government do what is purely federal work. And immigration has almost always been a federal issue, not a state issue, not a local issue. But now we've got people in 33rd filling up the jails. And Mayor Demings just recently came out and indicated we're going to put a limit on that, which is great. That's a step in the right direction. They also came out and said they're going to stop the practice of holding people for 72 hours and then sending them out somewhere else and then bringing them back under new numbers, which that to me is wild. I mean, how can we hold people for a civil infraction for longer than we hold criminals? A criminal without a charge declared gets 48 hours. It's a hard stop. Once the 48 hours passes, you have to let them go. Even if you suspect them of committing a grave criminal offense, right? This could be someone suspected of murder, but if there's no evidence and they can't actually put the charge on them, the DA won't let them yet, that person goes back on the street. But an immigrant you can detain for 72 hours, or you send them out, bring them back on the same charge, and then keep detaining him indefinitely? That's ridiculous. So that's what really pushed me to get into politics. Is I think we need more aggressive, we need more imaginative and more aggressive people that are willing to push back on the federal and state folks. I like to say I'm running because I want to see local power in local hands in local communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, by the time we're recording this on February 8th, by the time that this goes live, I'm sure that the Board of County Commission is going to discuss a lawsuit against the federal government, and there's going to be more conversations about the lack of reimbursement for those rebookings that are costing people like $180 each detainee per day. And this is from our local tax dollars that are already so resource strained. And, you know, it frankly, it keeps our communities less safe, because if local law enforcement is having to deal with federal issues, then they're not able to focus on, you know, the safety concerns that are outside of the immigration concerns in our own communities. And if our jails are all full to the brim, I mean, what do we do?
Yeah. And just to back up, it's not even really the financial cost, right? I think they've claimed it's $92 per day that we're not being reimbursed, because the $180 is like what it costs for them to house, but they're only being reimbursed, I think it's $88 a day. And so there's a $92 discrepancy per person that's in there. They claim that the limit is going to be $128. So that is $11,776 per day for people who have no criminal charges. That's not counting the immigrants who are in there who have some sort of a local charge. And it's usually BS. It's usually something like, oh, they were driving with the tail light out. Oh, they were driving with a license with the wrong address on it. Something that normally would not get you thrown in jail, but now all of a sudden, because you're Latino, it does. And that's why I say it's the same fight. It used to be driving while black, and now it's driving while Latino. It's getting broader and bolder who they're going to come after, until eventually it's all of us. And until we realize that, we're not going to be able to rise up. And so that's why I hope more people start to realize that. And I think people are. I'm seeing a lot more people of all kinds of genders, races, ethnicities, religions coming out to these protests and voicing this opposition, especially after what happened with Alex Preddy. And it's a shame that it took an American citizen being harmed in that way, and Renee Good as well, because there were others that were killed before that. There were Mexican nationals that were killed on New Year's Eve, for example. And we should be equally appalled that our government is killing any people in our land because of immigration status. That's not justifiable. And I don't think there's any universe where people think this is, well, where the majority of people think that this is a good thing or think that this is okay. I think the gut reaction when people see these kinds of acts by ICE is, oh, that's bad. And I think people may have some sort of a dissonance with it and they try to justify it one way or another. But I think there's this sort of universal gut punch when we see somebody that gets taken out on the streets.
I hope people are paying attention. I mean, what do you think about the Supreme Court case where they're basically legally allowing racial profiling?
Oh, God. Yeah. So if we take the courts at their word, right, that's only supposed to apply to California because these whole, no nationwide injunctions thing. So that technically shouldn't really apply to Florida. But what they say is that it's not just about race. It's not just about language. It's about those two things, plus the fact that they work a low-wage job. The Supreme Court is not supposed to allow enforcement that encompasses a majority of lawful behavior. So the majority of people working low-wage jobs, even the majority of people working low-wage jobs who happen to be Latino or speak Spanish, are law-abiding citizens, residents, or have some sort of a status here. And I think it's sort of disingenuous. I think a lot of this is disingenuous, what they're doing to immigrants. It's a scapegoat thing. Why are the costs of groceries so high? Oh, it's the immigrants. It's not the fact that Donald Trump raised tariffs, which affect the consumer, not the place where those products come from. They still get paid, but we have to pay it. We pay that increase. Why are the costs of housing going? Oh, it's the immigrants' fault because they're buying up all the houses. It's an excuse for people to not direct their frustration at the government and the 1%. And I think the bigger divide between people, if we want to talk about a divide, it's the wealthy, it's the haves versus the have-nots, right? And I think if we started to realize that a little more, maybe we wouldn't be so quick to go after these boogeyman arguments or to accept them. We'd be a little bit more critical of them.
100%. So we have proof that he is a lawyer because he brought a legal pad and a pen. With a lot of case law for precedent to add as a highlight to his points that he's making, which is a very lawyer thing to do.
Well, we don't go anywhere without a legal pad.
So, so you decide, you wake up and you're just like, I have to, was there like a particular video on your Instagram or testimonial from somebody that you were working with that just like lit up your brain and said, I have to file today?
It was. It was the school boards. The school boards came out with this policy that they were going to allow ICE to come in and talk to students, to children, without their parents present. They said, we will try to contact the parents, but we're not guaranteeing that we actually will. We'll give them a phone call. But even if they're not there, we're going to go talk to your kids anyway.
What a nightmare.
As somebody who, when I was a child, I was stopped and I didn't understand any of my rights or understand why, I could easily see how that would be an abuse of power and how terrified these kids would be. So I started offering to families, I was like, look, I will give you a free pro bono contract if you're worried that ICE is going to come into the schools and try to talk with your kid. I started doing know your rights trainings, but the contract was so essentially they can tell their kids, you already have an attorney. If they come in with guns and try to intimidate you, you don't say anything. You tell them, I have an attorney. I'm not talking to you until he's here. Mm-hmm. And that's a power that people have. And a lot of people may not feel that way. In one of our Know Your Rights trainings, actually, we got a question, a very thought-provoking question, actually from somebody else who's running for office, Heather Pierre, who's great. And she asked, as a Haitian mother, how do I tell my children who don't have these same rights? We can't go out and, talk to the police the way some people can. If they start saying, oh, well, I have rights, then we immediately get abused. What do I tell my children? And that's a hard question to answer, right? Because especially where I come from, I know it's a different conversation for certain parents telling their kids when they go out on the street than others. And so I can't sit here in my position of privilege and say, well, you have to just know their rights and tell them that they can use it. No, a lot of times it really is just, try to butter them up and try to act as nice as possible and be sweet and hope that they don't abuse your rights against you. But if they do, you do have to know what they are, because that's when they've been violated. And then we sue them. We hit them where it hurts, in the wallet, because once they start getting lawsuits, these 5 habeas petitions, I haven't even talked about that, but the habeas petitions are being granted because ICE is making Orange County break the law. Mm-hmm. And the court is recognizing that. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, you can't hold them for that long. So in those cases, they're liable for up to $200,000 per person. For those 5 cases alone, that's $1 million. So if we started every time they violate our rights, and this is what I told her in response, I said, we can't necessarily protect our kids. We have to inform them and arm them with knowledge so that they know when their rights have been violated and they can come and talk to you. But every parent has to decide for themselves what to tell their kids and how they can feel safe. And if we don't feel safe to go to the store, if we don't feel safe to go to church and the school and the hospital, where ICE has now said they're all going to start coming, I mean, we are not safe as a community, and we're failing our constituents.
We're failing our kids. I mean, right before this podcast, I had Moms Demand Action come in, and they were talking about how the state legislature right now is trying to allow professors and educators to carry and have a very small amount of training, even proposing potentially having a selected group of students being trained in carry and on school property and on college campuses.
Because students with guns seems like a good solution. I'm being sarcastic.
It's just so sad because hearing, things like this, we're just putting so much on kids.
Yeah.
I've never had to think about any of these complex ideas when I was just in grade school. And now we're trying to teach kids, know your rights and, say that you have an attorney when you're being searched. Like, this is just too much.
That's where we're at. We thought the end was when they had to go and do, active shooter drills. And that's enough trauma on a child. I remember having to get under the chair and pretend what happened to get in the corner if they come into your school. And it's like, I get the hurricane drills, right? I get that. But I mean, it's some of these things that we're doing to these kids and the circumstances we're putting in, they should be allowed to be kids.
Right.
School is a place where they go to learn. It's not a place where we should allow ICE agents in, period. I don't care if they have a warrant or not, but they used to be protected. It was the schools, it was the churches, and it was the hospitals. ICE couldn't come in there. The certain agents from the federal government could not come in there, and we got rid of those protections.
And it's having an economic impact as well. I mean, they're already talking about closing 7 schools. Right. This week, there's a conversation about potentially exploring closing more schools. Yep. People are scared. They're leaving the country. In addition to the voucher program, but there's so many people that are citizens and are too scared to have their kids be in this community. And so they're taking them out and either homeschooling them or just taking them out of the country just to be proactive. Yeah. And that is coming with a huge financial implication to our public school system.
Which affects the whole community, not just immigrant children. Mm-hmm. And the craziest thing about that is there was a case with the Florida Department of Education, and it was actually LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, who brought the case. And the Board of Education, in a settlement agreement called a consent decree, agreed that because of the way the Florida Constitution is written, education, public education, a free quality public education belongs to everyone who's in Florida, regardless of your status. And they agreed that the K through 12 schools will not ask at all about status. Mm-hmm. That is in writing in an agreement that the state agreed to. And by facilitating these sort of ICE interactions with the students, I think they're violating that. And if they are violating that, more ammunition for lawsuits. And we're just opening ourselves up so much to liability as a county, in addition to the human harm. Mm-hmm. And I circle back to the preamble of our charter. I actually read that in preparation for this. The preamble to the county charter says, the citizens of Orange County join together in the belief that governmental decisions affecting local interests should be made locally rather than by the state. In order to empower the people of this county to make changes in their own government, do hereby avail themselves of full home rule benefits afforded by the Florida Constitution. So essentially, local folks should run local politics. Mm-hmm. And it's the opposite of what's happening now. Yeah.
Well, you are running to represent, entire communities. There are some people that feel like this issue doesn't impact them, even though it does.
Right.
If you could say anything to those folks, what would it be?
Well, I would go back to that home rule. A lot of people don't know what home rule is, so I just want to take a second and sort of describe it. In short, it's the ability of local people, local communities, and local governments to govern their own local affairs. So when the state comes in, even if your children aren't immigrants, even if you're not directly affected by this particular attack on home rule, what happens when we want to turn, what is it? what's the name of the park? They just had a park. We won a victory that I wasn't involved in the fight, but I did see a lot of the signs while I was out canvassing. And it's the fort where it was the first fort where the Seminoles interacted with the settlers.
Fort Gatlin.
Gatlin. I was going to say Gadsden. But yeah, Fort Gatlin. How do we get community-led initiatives like the Fort Gatlin initiative to cross the finish line if we don't even control our own priorities? How do we get our money spent on access to transportation services? How do we get our priorities of lowering the cost of housing? How do we get our priorities of connecting farmers to food deserts? And farmers are already struggling. We could help connect them to food deserts and to schools if we had the authority to do that. Or whatever other local project it is that you want in your neighborhood for your community. If home rule is not really being protected, then you don't have that power. It's chipping away at all of our authority, all of our say in the government around us. And so even if this particular issue doesn't affect an individual, the overall effect on us having less power, on the governor saying he can come in and remove every single member that we elected to be our representatives, that should scare people. And that should make you feel like our home rule, our ability to govern ourselves is under attack, because it is.
And it sounds like you are running into the fire because you're very aware of the legal ramifications of, a commissioner being taken off of the board because they, for example, voted, to not comply with the 287G agreement.
Or just to ask to negotiate. That's all they wanted. They wanted to ask to negotiate. They wanted to come to the table, and they got threatened with removal.
And fined. They were threatened with a fine and with potential jail time. I mean, why do you want to run? Why do you want to take that on? Because it's only going to be the first fight that we see that level of overreach, which is very extreme, very authoritarian.
If you want somebody who can stop the governor from abusing his authority and bring a lawsuit, you should elect the attorney. Because I can use the law to fight against this illegal use, this overbroad and vague use of authority. See, the governor's relying on a phrase that says you have to use your best efforts. Otherwise, you're a sanctuary city. Mm-hmm. Well, the way he's utilizing that phrase, basically if negotiating or asking to negotiate is not using best efforts, then he can remove people for any reason. And if he thinks he has that kind of plenary authority, he's got another thing coming. But we need people who are willing and ready to file a lawsuit against him, to come in there and challenge that authority rather than feeling that pressure. And we had two commissioners who were very brave, and they said, look, I feel conflicted. I can't let my personal conflict of wanting to stay on the board interfere with my decision of what's best for my constituents. And that's the kind of leadership we need. And that's one of the things that inspired me to get involved. It's like, oh, I can be that guy. I'm very loud and I'm not going down.
Oh, so you're not going to say things like, don't you want to know who your commissioner is? And since you elected me, that means that I shouldn't go against the governor, because if they remove me, then you're not going to have a relationship with the appointed person who will come after me. That was an excuse that so many people who voted to support the 287G agreement and banning homeless encampments. Yeah. These are the continued excuses that are used to vote against what the people overwhelmingly want to see.
That will not be me. I make that promise here. I know how to use the law to our advantage. And I think that if we had more people who were willing to stand on the hills, if it wasn't just those two commissioners, we wouldn't be hearing that excuse. It's true that the governor has removal power, as long as his use of the removal is legitimate. It's also true that he gets to appoint people. However, if, for example, you have forewarning, like a letter that's been sent to you stating you're going to get removed just for exercising your lawful authority as a commissioner, you can file an injunction. An injunction has to be ruled on by the court within 15 days. Mm-hmm. So you can go to the court. And in fact, in the charter, well, let me start with the injunction. So with the injunction, sorry, I bounce around a bit. But with the injunction, if you file this and you say, hey, court, this term is vague, it's overbroad, we don't think this removal is being exercised in a lawful way. Can you please prevent the governor from removing us until this lawsuit is clarified? They can come out with a court order saying you are not allowed to remove that commissioner. That's one way. The other way that the commissioners actually have, in the charter, they have under Section 209 special meetings. They only have to give 12-hour notice. It can be called by the mayor or 3 members of the board. And if there's no emergency, they do have to put every board member on notice. But if it's an emergency circumstance, like they're being threatened with jail time, they don't even have to do that. 3 members of the board can say, you know what, we need a meeting. 12 hours notice, we're setting it up now. And they can pass ordinances. They can pass resolutions. They can get together and say, this is an unlawful use of the removal power. We stand against it. And they can threaten their own lawsuit at that point. Mm-hmm. So I do think when there's the political will of the majority of the members of the board, or at least more than 3 members, or where there's the imagination to utilize the legal system as it is, we can do a lot more to fight back. And that's that sort of excuse of, well, don't you want it to be me? It's a nice excuse to fall back on, but it's sort of like, our hands are tied. Mm-hmm. The hands are never tied. There are solutions for as creative as people want to be. You just got to be willing to fight for them.
You know, government is so well known for that creativity, right? Just that outside of the box thinking in government.
Well, hopefully in the future.
I mean, if the right people are at the helm, I think that anything's possible. It's just that, you know, not everyone is built for that kind of fight, especially since it is a little unfair that when you think you're going to be a commissioner, you think you're going to talk about speed bumps and traffic lights.
Split oak and urban sprawl.
And now you're talking about being removed because you want to use our correction officers to drive undocumented folks to Alligator Alcatraz.
Right. Or they want to build one here in our own backyard, and we have to figure out how we can use zoning laws to try and put up roadblocks, or how we can interfere or obstruct that in some way, which we can. There are definite avenues that we can use. Do not let anyone fool you and tell you that there's no tools or nothing we can do. There always is.
It's just, there's a lot more being put on the average local elected official today. I mean, the state legislature is also barreling down on us. I mean, they are stripping local governments of home rule every single session. And this session in particular, it is egregious. There's over 20 land use bills that are tying the hands of local elected officers. Yeah. We have the Blue Ribbons Project, which is a bill that is over 10,000 acres of property that would be allowed to build 12 units per acre without the say of the local government.
What?
Which is basically a call out to Deseret Ranch and the huge swaths of property that are owned by the Mormons out on the east side.
Right.
We've been active in fighting that and successful, and they really are, the mega developers go and cry with their lobby up at Tallahassee, and they say, okay, just give them what they want. But what that means for us is our current water supply is already sparse for our existing population. Our ability to even create our own comprehensive plan is being preempted. I mean, they are trying to strip. I feel bad for anyone trying to run for office right now, even though I'm actively working on campaigns. So I feel bad for myself too, because this is a unique type of fight that is unprecedented and unfortunate, because there shouldn't be this much on the plates of local officers.
Not at all. And in Florida, where we are protected by mangroves, where we have the Everglades, where we have so many swamps and we have so many diverse ecosystems, we have split oak in Orange County, which, by the way, I just wanted to congratulate. I know you were active in that campaign. And there were a lot of people that were engaged in that campaign, but you were definitely at the forefront of it.
Split oak is a symbol of the overreach that has happened since years before I was even born, and the good old boys that have run Florida politics since before I was born.
Yeah.
I would say that all of the problems, I could probably pretty brazenly say, the majority of the problems that we have here in Florida are because of those same people that have been in power, who just allowed corporations to get what they want. to increase their profit margins at the cost of our ecosystems, at the cost of our quality of life. And because of that, Split Oak has become a symbol because it has to stop somewhere.
Oh, yeah. We can't build toll roads through our protected. I mean, the Orange County Charter specifically protects Split Oak. Mm-hmm. And it specifically says that the county can't pass any laws unless they are more protective of Split Oak, not less protective. And so it's hard to me to understand and conceptualize how we got to this idea of building a toll road through a protected environmental area, particularly one that the county charter specifically charges our county with the protection of. It's hard for me to understand how we urban sprawl and cover up, the wetlands that we really desperately need in order to be sort of floodplains for us, and then we act surprised about how our cities are flooding more and more, and we have to build all this infrastructure, spend all these tax dollars to fix it. Well, it's like we're creating these problems. If we developed more intentionally, if we developed more densely, and we developed particularly along transportation routes, which would help increase and encourage the use of public transit, then we wouldn't have as many of these problems. But you hit the nail on the head. It's the lobbyists. It's the people who want to go and develop as wide as you can out into the natural resources that are going, and they're not just telling Tallahassee how to vote. They're literally drafting bills that go to these legislators on their desks and they say, is this good enough? And then they pass it. That's one of our core principles in my campaign. I'm not taking any special interest money. All of our donations are coming from individuals who actually live in Orange County. We don't want money from big interests and I'm sure they're not coming to donate to me anyway, but we don't want these big interests that go and rule Tallahassee that can come down and, pay us and be like, oh, hey, we want you to make sure that we can develop here. No, that's not how this is going to work. We're not taking big tourism money. We are trying to make sure that the tourism industry pays its fair share. We're trying to make sure that developers are more intentional when they come in to develop, and we're trying to scrutinize them more as part of our campaign. We think that that's very necessary. If the development is not intentional to preserve the environment around us, or we're not actively looking at the environmental impacts, then we're doing a disservice to everyone that lives in Orange County.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm assuming, I'm not going to assume anything. You're going to tell us. What are your top 3 issues for when you get elected?
Sure. So my top 3 issues, the number one is, like I mentioned earlier, the home rule, the local power. Until and unless we can set our own agenda and control where our funding is going, we do not really have control. We can't set our priorities. The second is going to be affordability, and that includes access to services, cheap and efficient services like transportation. It includes what I was talking about earlier, connecting the Florida struggling farmers to food deserts, to schools, where we can use some of that food in our own state. It includes lowering the cost of housing, whether that's through, intelligent and intentional development or other means, but it involves trying to get the cost of living down because it's just outrageous. People should be able to afford to live where they work. Right. And right now, people can't even afford to live on the outskirts of where they work. I mean, they're going miles and miles away because they just can't afford most of these areas. And the minimum wage has not caught up with the cost of living. But the cost of living has been able to skyrocket because people have sort of abused it. We're seeing record profits at the same time we're seeing record low wages. That should not happen. And we should definitely de-incentivize that. And the third is environmental sustainability. I'm a native. I'm from the Lenape tribe of Delaware. They're Delaware indigenous people is what they're really referred to. A while ago, the federal government said that their genocide was too effective and there's not enough of us left. So they didn't say it in those words. Essentially they said there's not enough of us left to qualify as a tribe. And so I guess we don't count as people because, like I said, their genocide was too effective. So from those native roots, I really have developed this sort of sense of a need for balance. My dad used to have a phrase, and pardon the language, but he said, anything to the excess will fuck you up. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you could drink too much water and die from that. I really take that to heart. And we put so much excess into our abuse of systems, into our abuse of the land. We need to bring that back into balance. We need to protect biodiversity. We need to protect our wetlands. We need to make sure that we're not polluting all of the air and water around us. And if people are found to have done that, we as a board of county commissioners need to be ready. And I know this is, y'all are going to think, oh, he's a lawyer, he wants to sue everybody. But I mean, that's what we need to do. Corporations only understand money. And when we affect their bottom line and take a huge chunk of their money, not just to repair what they've damaged, but to prevent them from damaging it in the future, we need those sorts of aggressive tactics to protect our environment. That's the point we've reached. We can't afford to sit on our laurels anymore.
It's just so frustrating because, our county attorneys are taught to stay in a box and do everything possible to protect the county from lawsuits and to stop the county from entering into lawsuits. That's really the state of mind that our county attorneys are coming from. But currently. But, at this point, I think it's just we're just past the point of, desperation. And I think in order for commissioners and the mayors to even be to have any power, to even be effective at all, there has to be a lawsuit to say, hey, home rule is still in effect and you can't just continue. Because I think what's going to happen is the property tax fight is coming. Yep. By the time that this is public, I feel like maybe we'll have a little bit more of an understanding of what that property tax fight is going to look like and whether or not DeSantis is going to have support from the Republican legislature that seems to be fighting so bad that might be our only saving grace. But if the property taxes are cut, every commissioner is going to have to beg for every penny.
That's right.
In order to bring it into their community, even for just public safety.
And it's not just begging, it's going to be tied to all kinds of conditions. Whatever the state and federal governments want to attach as a requirement, right. Whether that's, banning certain people from schools or mandating that, certain things can't be taught or, saying that this money can only be used to help tourism, like the TDT funds, which are currently not being spent the way we would like them to be spent. There are so many problems with how we're spending the money we have now, but we only have a limited amount. And so if we restrict the sources of revenue coming into the county, we're not going to be able to provide most of the services that our residents depend on.
And that's what they want. They want Orange County specifically, blue counties to comply. Yeah. Because right now, the mayor has several initiatives to help, have certain programs in different languages. Right. Well, that could be considered DEI. And then right now there's a bill in the legislature that is actively trying to ban any type of DEI or hold local elected officials legally accountable and fined if they try to implement any type of DEI programs. But they get to define what DEI is.
And when did DEI become a dirty word? I'm sorry. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I like to say the words because individually, when you think about those three words, diversity. America was founded on diversity, first of all. we brought people over. Originally, we were trying to interact with the natives, with our folks, and that didn't pan out well. But we brought black folks over from Africa and forced them to work for us, and then eventually tried. Well, I wouldn't even say that we actually incorporated them into society. The way the United States is still set, it still has a sort of a wall up against the black community where they don't really feel like real Americans a lot of the time because that benefit of the doubt that I was talking about earlier, they don't get that. And other immigrants have come over and been a little more welcome. Like the rest, I'm Native and Irish, and my Irish ancestors came over, and because they were fair complexioned, they ultimately did end up getting absorbed into society here and more welcomed. But we've always sort of considered America this melting pot. I hate the metaphor of a melting pot because melting pot implies assimilation. It implies there's an American culture that we have. I don't think it's the case. I always preferred the mosaic example, how we all have our own little groups, little pieces, little parts to play in the bigger picture. And yes, the bigger picture creates this sort of culture, but there are so many different cultures that contribute to what American culture is. And American culture is growing, expanding, and evolving every day because of the different types of people we've let into our country. That was a foundation. So diversity has always been a foundational principle of America. Equity has too. If we look at the Constitution, it says equality, but I really think they meant equity when they put it in there. If we look at the 14th Amendment, it was that people who've been historically treated differently, particularly Black Americans, should be given equal treatment. And at the time, what that meant, and even today, what that means is certain people need to be treated different under the law, not equally, not the same. Certain people have started down here or been pushed down here. And because of that, we need to give incentives to help them get on a level playing field. That's equity. Equality says it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, whether you're rich or poor, we should treat you exactly the same. Every single person should get the food stamps. Every single person. I mean, realistically, equality is more socialist than equity could be considered. Whereas equity is no. The rich don't need it. The poor need it. So let's give it to the poor instead of giving it to the rich. And I think that makes more sense. We should take people's circumstances into consideration when deciding what benefits to give, when deciding what incentives to give. I personally think, especially in Orange County, we've had certain places in Orange County. Apopka was named in The Color of Law, it's a book I'm reading, as a discriminatory policy that blacks couldn't live on a certain section above or below the railroad. And out of all the cities in the U.S. they could have cited, they cited to Apopka, which I was a little shook by. I'm like, oh, this is our blue dot. Like we're in Orange County. Like I bet we were good. I mean, I've seen Division Avenue, right?
Yep.
We've seen the historical results of these racial zoning and loaning policies that continue to persist today. And we try to tell ourselves, oh no, people just want to live with people that they're comfortable with. It's just de facto segregation. It wasn't the law. The law didn't say that. Yes, it did. The local law in particular, and whether that's, counties or cities, or even if you get out of the governing bodies into the HOAs, people just didn't want certain kinds of people living there, and they used whatever power they thought they had to prevent them. We should be, in terms of equity, figuring out who's been affected by those policies and offering, for example, better loans to those folks to get into homes, to make home buying easier for first-generation home buyers. And when it comes to inclusion, I think that goes back to the diversity point, right? The more people we include in this vision of America, the more diverse we are, the stronger we are. If we just think our way is the best way, Americans are great, hoorah, rah, well, that's all well and good. But then you go out into the real world and you realize, oh, this country is doing better than us on that. That country is doing better than us on this. I mean, the Netherlands has the happiest place on earth, allegedly. But you look at Japan and their schooling system, well, really most of Asia and their schooling system, they do so much better than us in academic standards. And even locally at home, right? Look at homelessness. Salt Lake City eradicated homelessness, got rid of the homeless problem. You know how? They gave them houses. And so, it's a crazy solution, and people are like, well, we can't just give everyone homes. No, you can't give everyone a home, but you can give everyone who doesn't have one. You can give people who are out on the streets a shelter that doesn't have so many roadblocks that it's impossible for them to get in. I mean, if I'm homeless, I'm out on the street, I can't get an ID. And a lot of those places require that for me to come in. I might have substance abuse issues. That could be disqualifying, right? So we're not offering the services that people need. And we need to be more inclusive on who we consider American.
Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What are you talking about?
Right.
It's so easy to just get ahead.
What if I can't buy bootstraps, though?
Exactly. So day one in office, what are some policies that you're hoping to get off the ground?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to get off the ground when I was running is, this is more about access to transportation. I still want a direct line of transport from the airport to the central bus station downtown. And apparently that's already being worked on. I was talking with some folks, and we have the Sunshine Corridor, which is essentially a rail line that's being directed from various different parts of Orange County, not just from the airport to downtown. But if we had a way for people who are flying in to not have to park alongside that road in the airport, which is dreadfully dangerous for traffic, and could get directly plugged into the public transport systems we already have, that would encourage the use of public transit, and it would get people places faster, and it would reduce road congestion.
Oh my God. It would be, so I traveled to Berlin in December, and the airport had a station, and it connected you to every single vein, to the heart of every part of the community we could possibly need to go. And even with luggage, it was such an ease. Like, I preferred it over calling an individual Uber because it was that easy. It's literally 2 steps from where we were. Whereas with an Uber, you have to call and wait, and then it comes, and then you have to load it yourself and then get, it's like, no, just go on the train, and it helps stimulate the economy. It helps small businesses. It just, and frankly, it's fun and we deserve it.
China does the same thing, by the way. I lived over there for almost a year teaching kids English, and they have the elevated rail lines, which cool. I know those cost a lot more to make. So that's more of a long-term solution if we do it, but they are safer. They are better for the environment because they're not on the ground where the wildlife likes to walk. But directly from the airport, you can get to any single city in at least in Shenzhen, where I was staying. And I think we need to be looking at other places that have better systems to sort of incorporate, if we can, those kinds of solutions to our modern problems.
It might be more expensive, but it's less expensive in terms of if we continue to grow and put more cars in the road, the long-term maintenance and the wear and tear of our current infrastructure, it's a cost savings.
I'm going to hit you with this now. Oh, you mean that the government should be focused on long-term solutions, long-term expenses instead of short-term?
If I don't have a short-term win.
Right. Well, because all the politicians, well, not all, but many of the politicians these days, they only look at the short term. That what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, that's the next guy's problem. I'm just trying to fix it. I'm putting a Band-Aid on it until the dam breaks. Well, we need to be figuring out what the underlying problems are and addressing them before the dam breaks. Mm-hmm. Because if we wait till the dam breaks, it's going to be 10 times, 100 times more expensive to fix the problem than if we just did something preemptively. And I think that's where a lot of my focus is going to be: studies and figuring out what the core contributors are to pollution in Orange County, at least, and then going after folks who are those polluters so that we can raise a bit of revenue for these projects that we want to have to help get people better services.
If the state doesn't, block them from having any liability. That's true. The state is really good at doing that for their friends.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we can be powerful too.
That would be nice. I'm glad. I think you're probably the first candidate I ever heard say, I want to actively go after bad players that are polluting, because there's always this fear, of spending public dollars and having it be wasteful spending. But 90% of our water bodies are impaired with arsenic and mercury, and almost everybody I know has someone in their immediate family that has cancer. My husband just had cancer.
My mom has stage 4 lung.
On his 30th birthday, his third birthday. On his 30th birthday, he was diagnosed. We need to have an honest conversation about what contaminants are around us.
Absolutely.
And the government has to spearhead that. Otherwise, they're just going to turn a blind eye to cancer clusters, and people are going to continue to get sick and just not be heard.
Which has happened in many industrial towns all over the United States. And it kind of gets back to the other point of those racially, the racial zoning laws and loaning law. Part of the reason we have some communities that are both commercial and residential are because certain communities of color were deemed to be less valuable by the people who were in charge. And when they were developing the cities, they said, oh, that's fine. Put the plant right next to the Black community. Put the plant right next to the Latino community. Who cares if they breathe in those fumes? They're fine.
Apopka.
Taft in my community. There's a road, and I was talking to somebody on the campaign trail about this. There's a big road that all of the trucks go down, and it's abutted right next to houses. He's in a wheelchair, and he says that every single time a truck goes down there, because none of them follow the speed limit, there are no speed humps or anything on that road, which is something we could fix. But every time those big commercial trucks go down that road, his house vibrates. And I don't think anyone should have to live in those kinds of conditions. You should feel comfortable in your own home. You shouldn't. What if he had PTSD, right? Mm-hmm. What if this is somebody from, one of our veterans who, when the house starts shaking, he goes into panic mode? There are so many things that are just not thought about by people about the effects of pushing all of this residential and commercial areas into one. And I know I talked about urban sprawl a little bit earlier, but if we're going to intentionally develop, that's one of the things we have to focus on. Residential areas being residential, commercial areas being commercial, and we can find ways to connect the two, but they shouldn't be on top of each other.
Right.
So, and then the third thing, you asked me about 3, and this is probably the quickest one, the most important, the number one that I want to do because, again, local power is our number one thing. We are going to push ICE off our streets. We have local sheriffs. We have local law enforcement that are more than sufficient. My gripes aside about my own personal history, they are more than capable of figuring out who the actual criminals are, because we all know they're not going after the worst of the worst. They're not going after criminals. They're going after mothers and fathers and hard workers, contributing members of society, many of whom, by the way, pay taxes. They get an ITIN number and pay taxes on the revenue that they get because that helps them get better status. But then the IRS sends that information over to, whoever that doesn't live in our community, sends ICE agents down into our community from other states, other counties, other cities who don't live here. It's the opposite of community policing. Mm-hmm. And so we need our law enforcement officials to be actually invested in the communities that they're policing. And I think we have that to some extent in our sheriffs and our police. And if somebody commits a serious crime, they happen to be undocumented, they are more than capable of letting DHS know, hey, we got this person here, they don't have legal status. So why do we need masked agents in unmarked vans in an open carry state? That is a recipe for disaster. People are asking. I mean, if I saw somebody in a mask in an unmarked van get out and come at me on the street, I do have a concealed carry permit, so I'm not sitting down on that. I don't want to say anything that could get me in trouble, but I'm going to put them down.
You have the right to defend yourself.
I have the right to defend myself. I'm afraid for my life, which is a line that law enforcement know very well and know when to use it. Well, we should too. And at that point, I mean, if they're not identifying themselves, if they think they can come into a house without a warrant, I mean, that's ridiculous. If somebody busts down your door, your first gut instinct as a Floridian is to shoot them. And I know that that's not necessarily something that a lot of folks that you would call woke may agree with. So that's why I was questioning that earlier.
I understand your ground laws here that, I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of, but if somebody breaks into your home and even if they're a federal agent and they don't have a warrant in there, frankly, we have to just be honest. Many Proud Boys and white supremacists are getting these ICE agent jobs.
Yeah, and they're not trained at all.
Not trained, and they are given military-grade weapons.
Being encouraged to jump in front of cars so that they can justify being afraid of their lives.
Exactly. So I feel like we need to all become concealed carry firearm.
I would agree.
Because I mean, this is the temperature, unfortunately. This is where we're at. I mean, the Black Panthers
walked around with AK-47s so that they could give free education and free food to the community. That's exactly the example that we need in our community. Because if not, they won't back down. They'll keep abusing us. They'll keep terrorizing our citizens, and people will keep being afraid to go to school and church and the hospital. And
I just don't like the fact that there are some commissioners that even are Hispanic that are not as vocal as we need them to be right now. And it frustrates me because the community is so scared. Even if I know white people that are U.S. citizens that are like, I need to get my kid out of this country. Yeah. And I'm like, if you're scared, imagine if you're brown with an accent. People are scared right now and they're looking for leadership. Yeah. And some of the silence has been really deafening for me. And maybe it's just because they're scared. Maybe it's they're confused because a lot of changes are happening over a short period of time. Yeah. But what more could a local elected official do, in your opinion?
I mean, being vocal is the bare minimum, right? Like, I think you're much more gracious than I am about why they're not being vocal. I think they're very comfy in their positions of power and have decided, it doesn't affect me. I am the commissioner. They're not going to come after me. But
I mean, if they're closing schools, that means they're going to be laying off teachers. That means that more people in your district are going to be, poverty stricken and are going to be homeless. And it's going to
hurt tourism too. I mean, nobody's going to want to come here. People are already canceling flights and issuing travel advisories not to come to Florida.
It's a domino effect.
It is.
And so you have to stand up and speak out.
The farm workers too. I mean, immigrants aren't only farm workers. They're not only in the hospitality industry. They do a lot of jobs that people don't really realize are the bedrock and foundation of our economy. But our farm workers are already struggling. And plus with this freeze that's going on right now, I mean, we have we have entire fields that are going unpicked because Americans who aren't immigrants don't want to do those jobs. And it's like, you constantly hear this, like, oh, they're taking our jobs. Are they, Bob? Are they really coming for your job? You're going to go out there in the fields? You're going to go and clean the beds at the hotel? Are you really going to do that? No, they're not. They're not taking your jobs. They're taking jobs that Americans don't want to do if they come to take jobs at all. You know, sometimes they're here on a student visa. And a lot of people, that's actually the majority of folks who are here undocumented. It's because they had a valid visa. They came here the right way, and they just happen to overstay their visa for whatever reason. Sometimes it gets canceled by an administration who is, gone very rogue. Canceling TPS for Haitians while their government is in turmoil, canceling TPS for Venezuelans right after we just bombed. Well, we didn't bomb, sorry. Right after we just removed their head of state, which, good riddance to Maduro. I'm not saying he was a good guy. I'm not saying that he did anything right by his people, but I do respect the sovereignty of other countries. And I think it sets a very bad precedent if we are doing exactly what Russia's doing to Ukraine, just going in and snatching up, land or snatching up resources, snatching up oil that we think we have a right to. And I don't think anybody's really believing that this is for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. I don't think that anybody would look at the situation in Haiti or Venezuela and say, yeah, it's safe. Go ahead and send them back. TPS exists for when governments are in turmoil. And so I do think we need to be not just vocal. We need to put actions behind our words on the commission to bring it back. We need to be passing resolutions that condemn certain acts, whether it's the federal government or the state government. And we cannot sit here and be silent. Not as an individual commissioner, not as a board, not as a human, right? As a person, we need to recognize that these kinds of activities, this kind of behavior, this kind of malice towards our fellow person is wrong. Morally, religious, however you want to look at it, it's just not right. And I think more and more people are starting to see and feel that. So to your point, the silence from the board is deafening.
Yeah. Well, we have other fights too. Visit Orlando. By the time this is recorded, it'll be past this date. But Tuesday, we have a fight with Visit Orlando and their contract amendments. Because of an audit of 1 year that showed almost $20 million of what Phil Diamond, the comptroller, always tells me is not misappropriated, misclassified.
It gives hope. No, the Hope scandal with this.
Yeah, the Hope.
It gives
scandal.
hope vibes.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're wasting and abusing the money, and we do need to hold them accountable. And they're trying to audit us, right? We did Project 2050, and they came in and said, "Well, Doge is going to audit all of you to try and sort of scare us into compliance." And so far, we haven't really failed on that. So we have the right to conduct audits and then punish the bad actors. If they're going to audit us, let's go Doge them.
Right.
And one of our commissioners said that. I don't know if it was Nicole Wilson or Kelly Semrat, but one of them mentioned that, and that quote lives in my head rent free.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, we have a lot of other fights that are coming up. They recently banned sleeping outside on public property. That really frustrates me because if you are in communication with any of the nonprofits that are doing the frontline work for our unhoused population, there is not enough. It's just not enough. People are standing outside for hours waiting for an opportunity at a bed because the bed supply is so short. Right. And to ban the ability for someone to sleep in a well-lit place that's on public property where they feel safe and maybe there's some security.
Outside of the rain, It's
the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yeah, there's a quote from a TV show, and the name slips me right now. I think it's Newsroom or something like that, where he says, "We used to go to war with poverty, not poor people." And that has been a chord that has been struck in my heart because I have friends who are in the city planning sphere, and we all sort of recognize that this architecture that we build as a deterrent for homeless folks, like putting the bars on the benches, putting the spikes under the underpass, the places where people like to go because there's coverage from the elements, that sort of intentionally harmful architecture, it sort of exemplifies that we don't really care about these people. We've abandoned them as society. And I don't think that's the tone we should be taking. if you're an unhoused person, there's a reason for that. And most Americans are closer to being homeless and their next paycheck, if it doesn't come through, than being a millionaire. And I think we all act
Speak for yourself.
Hey, look, as an attorney, I'm not rolling in Benjamins either. You know, I've been working for myself for a while, so I've paid all our own expenses. But I'm still closer to being homeless than I am to being a millionaire.
We all are. We all are. We're one Hurricane Dorian away from just not having any other options,
or one disability check not going through on the right date.
You know, so I appreciate those comments. One question that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, do you have something that, you're going to be running, obviously you're a lawyer and a candidate. Do you have something that you do that like replenishes your cup?
Oh God, that's a tough question. So I'm a big anime guy. I love to watch anime. Some of my tops are Gurren Lagann and From the New World. I'm recently rewatching One Piece just because life imitates art, art imitates life. It's not my favorite out of the big three, so please don't hate on me.
It's on my list.
It's very
Everybody
long.
Talks about it.
It's so long. But I mean, the flag from the show is being used as a symbol of revolution around the world at this point.
So cool.
So you have to give the show credit for that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I've had conversations with people where the main character, Luffy, is basically a pirate, and he goes around meeting people who are nice to him. And if they're nice to him and treat him well, he'll go and protect them and topple their tyrannical governments. So some of my friends made the comment, if we gave Luffy a McChicken, he'd take Trump out for it. He'd topple the whole government. So anime is one. I find a lot of joy in watching that. Video games and spending time with friends, playing cards. But honestly, I haven't had a lot of time for that. So my cup has been refilled going out and doing advocacy work, because that makes me feel like I'm making a difference. Mm-hmm. Going out to the protests, going out to do mutual aid and help families who are struggling, get food, put food on the table and get diapers and things like that. That's been replenishing the soul a little bit. So I really enjoy those opportunities.
Awesome. So tell people, how can they support you? What are you going to be working on? Plug all the things.
Yeah. So we do have canvases every Saturday, and we are currently doing them by paper, but we're going to modernize that, and we'll get a system where you can come out and have it directly on your phone. We are also doing phone banking, so we need folks to come out and call people so that we can beg them for money, because I, as a candidate, suck at asking for money. I will be completely honest about that. I feel grimy asking folks for money, but here's the thing. If I don't want to take special interest money, if I want this to be a grassroots campaign by the people and for the people, we need your help. And so you can go to walker4d3.com. There's a donate link on there, even if it's just $1 or $5. The maximum limit is $1,000, but I'm not asking anyone to go out and, put their whole paycheck on there.
I'll ask for you.
Listen, give what you can when you can. If you can make a small recurring donation, those help too. But those go on reports, and it helps show people that we're a grassroots campaign. So that's the number one thing right now is helping with canvassing and then helping with donations. We need 1,200 petitions to get on the ballot. I'm happy to say we've collected over 300 so far. Cool. Although there's a pretty high rejection rate. We're getting better. The first one, 20 out of 60 were rejected, so a third. This last one that we dropped off, 70 out of 80 were accepted. So we're getting better. And then this next batch that we're dropping off, I hope that all of them get accepted. But we need petitions. I think it's 1,074. But I'm telling folks 1,200 so that we sort of cover that spread.
Yeah.
And I think that's really it. Come out and see us at events. I'm doing Know Your Rights trainings with various immigrants' rights organizations, and fight the good fight in whatever way you can. Even if it's not helping this campaign, just do right by your neighbors. Do right by your family, and every interaction at a time, we can help make the world a better place.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the community and fighting so hard. And best of luck to you with your campaign.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.